they understand it that thoroughly, but they'll get paid less than someone who is a senior admin clicking wizards in a Microsoft interface. I mean, that was really one of the genius things that Microsoft did. They made becoming a system engineer easy because it's all just click here, click there. Not to say that all are just that. I mean, many get into PowerShell and they
You're going to upset a
they
lot of
do
people real
a
soon.
lot more. I'm pissing everybody off today, and it's kind of intentional.
We left off on a conversation last week that I think we need to explore a little bit more about who should get into cybersecurity, who should not get into cybersecurity, what kind of jobs should cybersecurity even be. I know you and I have some major differences on this. So
You got to understand. I mean, I get it. It's the hot field right now. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of demand. There are way more jobs than there are people to fill them. And as a result, it's a job where a person can get it into six figures very quickly. So who wouldn't want to say, I'm getting into cybersecurity. I want to make six figures. It's a logical thing. But is that really where the industry needs to go? I'd say no.
Probably. And I say probably. I think it's funny because we have varying philosophies on this, but I think it really comes down to, first you got to set the baseline, right? What does it mean to be in the cybersecurity industry? Because a sysadmin could argue that they're in the cybersecurity industry. So tell me why they aren't.
It's funny. I don't disagree with that at a fundamental level. Really, by that definition, though, everyone in IT is in cybersecurity.
Ah, yes, they are.
And if everyone in IT is in cybersecurity, then fine. Yes, everyone can get into the field, and they should have an entry point into the field. What I'm really focusing on is those who are designated as cybersecurity specialists. And if a person is a cybersecurity specialist, in my opinion, they should have expertise in the underlying field that they're trying to secure.
Okay, so when you jump on Indeed or Glassdoor or what have you, you're not necessarily gonna see cybersecurity specialist a ton on there as a job role, but you may see something like cybersecurity subject matter expert or entry level security analyst, right? That's kind of what you're looking at as maybe we shouldn't have entry level jobs begin with security analysis.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm
Okay.
just saying that the prerequisite to being a cybersecurity analyst, even if it's an entry level as a cybersecurity analyst, should be at a career exit point that came prior to that. In other words, again, the role is to analyze other people's IT. And the thing is, if you can start off without any real underlying knowledge of how the systems work, what's normal communication, what's abnormal, if you don't actually know the underlying system, then you're reduced to just following rules, following standard procedure, following some sort of monkey see, monkey do list. And if that's what you're doing, why not use analytics for that? Why not use automated systems for that? Because there's no real value add of having a human if they're not actually able to provide human level expert analysis. So yeah, that's my issue. My issue is that how can someone be an analyst for the security of a system they don't understand?
I'm totally on board with you. I come from the viewpoint that if you work on a computer or if you develop an information system, you're in cybersecurity. That's how it is today. Cybersecurity is so pervasive. Every job within cybersecurity has this, or every job within managing, monitoring a system. A lot of the tasks in those jobs are all related to something about cybersecurity. So we might as well just drop the facade now. Cybersecurity is not this mountain, to climb to get to as an industry. There's a lot of people in it. It's a very, very big
Yeah,
umbrella. So
and you know what?
we might as
That's
well
my
just
other but that's my other pet peeve is when something is everything, then it's nothing. You know,
well, but that's
you
the
know,
thing is
when
that
we
there's
say
there's a second part to that. No, there's a
everything is
second part
cyber,
to
then
that.
there is no cyber. I mean,
There's a second.
what's the
There's
point
a
of
second
having
part to
cyber
that.
if everything is cyber?
Cybersecurity. We've talked about this a bunch of different times in these different episodes. Cybersecurity is a massive umbrella that covers a lot of different things, a lot of different traditional roles that were their own professions are now being swept into cybersecurity, even, to the extent where you look at, things like asset inventory. But likewise, a lot of those traditional professions are being lost through the use of um, artificial intelligence or automation, stuff we talked about last week, right? So at the end of the day, a lot of different traditional jobs are, I believe, just under the umbrella of cybersecurity. I think what you're getting at, though, is analyzing security, the implementation of security, how effective security controls can be, are often left to entry level positions. We've seen that enough in our time, and
And that's
that
a problem.
becomes an issue. So there are
I think it's a
certainly
big problem.
tiers of expertise that are needed. I argue that today, based on the tools that are available, the need to understand or have in-depth experience with programming is not a requirement to be an expert in Microsoft Word.
And those are very, very different things. I mean, one is using a system, and the other is building that system. And those are two very different roles, very different jobs. In fact, that's actually my longest standing pet peeve in the whole IT business is sometimes people give as much weight, credit, pay to those who are expert users of someone else's software as those who can actually build the software themselves from scratch. It's always been a pet peeve. I've seen it throughout my career where you'll get programmers who could start from scratch and build a complex system and understand it from every level, from the physical layer all the way to logical levels. They understand it that thoroughly, but they'll get paid less than someone who is a senior admin clicking wizards in a Microsoft interface. I mean, that was really one of the genius things that Microsoft did. They made becoming a system engineer easy because it's all just click here, click there. Not to say that all are just that. I mean, many get into PowerShell and uh,
You're going to upset a
they
lot of
do
people real
a
soon.
lot more. I'm pissing everybody off today, and it's kind of intentional because the the point is we saw an explosion in our industry, and I'm not talking just cybersecurity. I'm talking about the entire IT industry. It grew at such an exponential rate that it was absolutely impossible for enough bottom up comprehensive computer experts to fill all of those roles. It had to be made easier. But the thing is, as it was being made easier, the differentiation between skills became cloudy. And the ability to really recognize who actually has the most skills and who doesn't, and and where they fit into the pecking order, it all became a shambles.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't disagree with you on that. I mean, some of the best people we've ever worked with, some of our people that we've hired, that's something that we both look for when we actually are doing interviews, or how well versed is somebody in a multitude of things, not one singular thing. And to that extent, I think that is something that's a logical follow on of why you see people who are experts at using a GUI as opposed to someone who could like build a GUI for you. um you know I liken it to this: you drive a vehicle, but you're not a mechanic, but you got to take it to a mechanic to get it worked on, but that mechanic isn't going to be a expert in physics to understand how the vehicle works, but they do know how all the parts fit together. They do know what something's supposed to look like, what something's supposed to sound like, and can trace back problems when something doesn't work. None of that requires them to have an innate understanding of com, you know combustion, right? So I'm sure that helps.
That's an interesting analogy. Let's run with that for a
Well,
minute.
well, I'm going to run with that because again, Does it make a better does it make for a better mechanic for someone who has soup to nuts, a full 100% understanding of everything? Absolutely. But they're also extremely expensive. So at the end of the day, if I'm in the C suite, if I'm an executive and I have a limited understanding of how to build a car, how to, maintain a vehicle, all of that, I just need the cheapest guy I can get that does the best work for what I need. The answer is not this is the best option. It's this will do. And that's why we're seeing what we
And
see now.
that that pragmatism is definitely carried the day. I don't disagree with that. But let's just take your analogy for a minute. Okay, you have a driver of a car, novice driver. You have an expert driver of a car. You have a mechanic. You have a novice mechanic. You have an expert mechanic. But then you have a mechanical engineer that actually works at building and designing cars.
Mm-hmm.
Then you
Mm-hmm.
have, I mean, there are a lot of layers before you get to physicists uh, at the very, very
Sure.
base
Sure.
science.
I cut the steps
Here's
out.
the
Yeah.
thing. But here's the thing. Do you take a novice mechanic and get him working at Tesla, building on the next Model S? you know,
No,
uh, you know,
no. Of
you
course
know.
not. Those are different
But,
job
but
functions, but
but
they're different.
that's
Hang
what
on.
we. But that's exactly what we keep doing in this industry. We keep taking people who are expert users of a system and trying to make them into engineers for those systems,
I
and it falls flat, and it ultimately is the reason why we see so much poor cyber hygiene, so many vulnerabilities, and so much attack surface across the entire enterprise, and not just enterprise, across the entire industry.
well, let's just call this. Let's just call it what it is, right? Where are we seeing this most prevalently? What sector of cybersecurity are we seeing this happen the most? Especially you and me. Where do we see this most? It's in governance, right? I mean, it's not happening with network penetration. It's not happening with blue teams. It's not happening with incident response. It's happening with just governance, policy. That's where this is occurring. Because if I am a systems engineer and I get tasked to go build a system, build a network, if I don't know how to do it, I get fired because I have to know how to do these things. But if I have a job where I have to sit back and know the textbook meaning of things, where I have to know what the rules are, right? And I have to essentially go in and ensure that the rules and the procedures are being followed. Yeah, I'm not necessarily going to need to have an in-depth understanding of the one and the zero. Does it go a long way and does it help? Absolutely. But again, that's not where this industry has gone. And so I'm not, I agree with you. I
But
mean,
that's
I'm just,
but that's
there's a
that's a
reason for it
flaw.
though.
But that's a flaw, though. I mean, there's always a margin of error in these systems. I mean,
Mhm,
even in complex text-based systems where everything's on the command line, there's still a huge margin of error. So,
mhm,
and even in programming, I mean, uh, uh, let's take a typical thing that we teach in ethical hacking classes. We teach how to do script injections, SQL injections, uh, things like that. Well, what does that take advantage of? It takes advantage of poor programming in a web app. It takes advantage of the fact that people are just passing values from an
mhm,
untrusted environment into a trusted environment
mhm.
without validation. That's bad programming. But guess what? The program worked.
Right.
It worked. It just didn't work well. Or rather, it was vulnerable. It may have worked just fine until someone exploited that vulnerability. So the point is, just because it works doesn't mean they're really qualified to be building a system that you can rely on as a trustworthy system, which means you have to have someone in the process, someone who is an expert enough to actually find the flaws and find the poor practices in the system. And you can't get someone who doesn't know anything about programming to find programming flaws.
Yeah, and I think that this is you and I agree on this mostly. So to keep it really entertaining, I'm just going to keep disagreeing with you, or at least being like, oh, this is the real problem. but
Right.
I think what we have is an issue kind of labels, right? I said before, everything is cybersecurity. There's multiple different job types in cybersecurity. Just like you can say you're in the auto industry and mean you're either a car salesman or a mechanic, right? Two vastly different job sets with different knowledge bases. But yeah, you can all say you're in the auto industry, sure. So I think that what we have is just a labeling problem because right now what we're seeing is entry level cybersecurity subject matter expert or entry level cybersecurity analyst. That's the job title, and that job title is wrong, because what that does is that allows exactly for the problem that you just stated. We're not going to have somebody who is an engineer who is in the auto industry uh, paid the same as somebody who's I don't know, a test driver, right? I mean, they're two completely different job functions. They're two different knowledge bases. Expertise levels are very, very different. And that is not acknowledged enough, I think, in the cybersecurity industry
and,
overall.
and honestly, that's probably the root of my whole problem with this. And you see organizations that try to deal with this. I mean, let's take on the certification front. If you want to get a CISSP certification, you can take the test, you can pass the test, but you can't be certified until you have at least 5 years practicing in the field. See, that's an attempt to say, okay, you know, you can't just pass a test and be this. You have to actually build up a skill set, build up the knowledge base to
Experience.
do
You
this.
need to have the experience,
You got
period.
to
You
have
have to
some
have a level
real
of experience. Absolutely.
and so that there are organizations that attempt. My thing is sometimes you have to look at the cross section of skills that a person has. Okay, if they went to college. What was their degree? You know, what was the skill set that went into and came out of pursuing that particular degree? And then when it comes to the certs, are they just taking soft certs? Are they just taking certs that are based on management skills, or do they have some technical skills? See, you look at a cross section, you can kind of get a sense sometimes of where someone is and whether someone really belongs in a cybersecurity position. But honestly, I got to keep going back to the same thing. You can't have someone evaluating the effectiveness of security on systems they don't understand. Otherwise, they're just checking boxes that someone else wrote. And then you need to have somebody that can write the check boxes for them to check off. And if that's all you're going to do, get an automated tool to do that for you.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. My stance is this: are there entry level positions in the cybersecurity industry? I'll beat this horse to death. Absolutely 100%, because cybersecurity, there are a ton of different roles, tasks, etc. However, can you be a cybersecurity analyst or a cybersecurity subject matter expert at an entry level? I don't think so. I
But the
don't.
thing is, there are. They do exist.
Now,
Companies
so
are
so
hiring them sometimes without even getting in college. They just maybe pass the Security Plus exam,
uh
and that's good enough. You're now a security analyst. It's happening.
so yeah, the Department of Defense has like baseline certs that you need, right? To have a certain level of job within their organization, and that's exactly what they do. Security Plus, without any experience, will get you into like a level 2 at least, and that's, or I'm sorry, I mean at the bottom level, but those levels are still analysis. Um, they're still required to be subject matter experts, so on and so forth. Uh, Again, I think that, like you said, there's an over reliance on certification. There's an over reliance on degrees to an extent. I do think so. And organizations will go ahead and hire someone who has a very long list of letters after their name without really understanding what those even mean
Yeah.
and what the
We should
context is.
we should take a minute and actually look at some of these things. What do they mean? You know, we talked for a minute about the CISSP. Well, that means you have a broad understanding of the various cybersecurity disciplines and 5 years practicing at least one of them. So that's some indication. Maybe you have a CEH, a certified ethical hacker. Well, that means you've passed a few skills associated with penetration techniques, at least enough to pass the test, and
Mhm.
it's not an easy test. It requires some knowledge there. The problem with both of these exams, though, is you can study to the exam and pass it without really fully understanding or being able to engineer your own solutions, uh, especially with the CISSP, because it's really just a list of practices. Even though that's a golden standard uh, certification, in the end, it's a laundry list of facts that you have to know to get that certification. It's not as skills based as some of the others.
I think you've identified a key problem, right? Is just an over reliance on certifications, and especially when it comes to the ignorance of a lot of the people who are actually doing the hiring, uh, as to what the
Well,
context, right,
and and
of
and
those
and let
certifications are.
and let me just cap off this point on certs. Um, I have a bunch of certs myself. I have the CSSP, I have the CEH. I have some of these certs myself. I'm not saying the certs are are in and of themselves good or bad. I think they're actually a necessary indicator that there's at least
Mhm.
some common understanding of skills, but they don't tell you everything.
Right. Yeah, they don't tell you everything. So we've identified the problem, right? We know what the problem is in the industry overall. I think we agree on that. So what's the solution? What do you got, boss? Well, how do we go ahead and solve this riddle?
I think you touched on a very important thing. The idea of being able to label everything as cybersecurity means that nothing is. So we do have to get the labels straight and understand where the roles are and where the evolution should go.
That's not what I said, but that's okay.
Okay, close to it. Yeah, maybe I'm playing off what you said. Maybe it wasn't exactly what you said.
Exaggerating for effect. It's fine.
All right, fine, 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 fine. Go ahead and do your Biden voice, whatever. It's your thing.
My Biden voice. I don't I don't
Whispering
have
into the mic,
oh
whatever.
oh
My point is this.
my fellow Americans. All right. Sorry. All
No,
right.
no.
All right.
Seriously, seriously though. Here's the point. The labels do confuse those who are in positions to make decisions, but without really the individual direct expertise over what the differences are. So labels matter, you know. Uh, and when it comes to creating career tracks for expertise, it's not that anyone needs to be an expert in all things. Very few people, honestly follow a career track like mine, where I started as a programmer, went to network engineering and system engineering, and then went to cybersecurity. That's kind of an unusual track, and a lot of people don't follow that track. And I don't think most people should. However, you should follow a vertical track. If you're a programmer, you become an entry level programmer. You get mentored, you get better, you become an expert programmer. And once you're an expert programmer, if you want to specialize in application security, then that's another level. But it shouldn't be that someone who's barely a programmer skips over becoming an expert programmer to then be a application security analyst who's trying to find flaws in the work of expert programmers. It doesn't work for me that way. Same thing with network engineering. There's an entry path to get into network engineering and to work your way up, become an expert, get varying levels of certs or whatever the case is, to the point where you can build an enterprise class network with all the devices, layer 2, layer 3, and everything in between. Great. But once you're an expert in that, then you're the guy who picks it apart and finds the flaws and can exploit the weaknesses and can show the engineers what they're doing wrong. Database, same thing.
That's exactly what I did. I,
You know,
yeah, I mean, and not to cut you off. I think you're right, but you're siloing. I think cybersecurity. You're siloing it, which I think is somewhat needed, but they're not going to have these specialized roles at that level because they're not going to have the budget to do that. So what we've seen often especially in the last decade and a half or so is a lot of organizations looking to people who are Swiss Army knives that have enough of an understanding, enough of an expertise, and have enough of the ability to understand the cross sections of this industry because there's tons of them, right? I myself, I came from systems engineering, network engineering background, built up my expertise, transitioned over to security, becoming cyber, just going through the vertical motion like you just mentioned. However, back when I started that, very, very few people had that track, right? There weren't that many. And now what we're faced with, 20 years later, is we have the people who are in the job to do the analysis, the overall cybersecurity analysis for an organization who are multi-tracked, who have a little bit of understanding of everything, maybe an expertise in one field specifically, but the ability to understand at a high level, right, multiple facets of cybersecurity. I think that's just simply a symptom of how the field has grown,
Yeah,
right, and
and the
where
thing is,
where the need was at
pragmatism
different points in time.
pragmatism rules. I don't disagree with the fact that it's not realistic for an organization, mid-sized organization, even a large organization, to have experts in every modality. I get that. I agree with that. But I also think that's a flaw, maybe even a fatal flaw in the security architecture of the way these organizations are governed when it comes to cybersecurity. I really think it's a flaw. And I think the solution to that flaw is bringing in organizations like ours that can have the horizontal staff that are experts in all the modalities for the price of a contract instead of a price of a full-time employee, uh, and ultimately creating a utility for managed services on the cybersecurity front, just like we've done with cloud. You look at why cloud is so attractive to so many organizations, because the quality and the expertise and the scale of systems and the distribution, geographic distribution of data centers is far more than would be ever viable for one organization to do for themselves. But they can leverage that by moving to the cloud and using the cloud service provider. Same thing with managed service providers for cybersecurity services. You can get experts that you could never afford to hire when you go that route. I really think that in the end is the real solution.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we didn't mean for this to turn into a sales pitch for cyber. Sure,
Oh
there
yeah, oh
there is
yeah.
a need.
Oops, oops.
uh,
But not just
I mean,
Cybersure. There are tons of companies that do the same thing that we do.
there's hundreds of companies, but I think you're right. There's a need to decentralize, and that's why you see a lot of organizations that do exactly that, where they go to a company like ours and they say, we need top to bottom, cybersecurity help. Just help us, please. We just had a data breach or so on, or something happened where the bosses are pushing us to now completely reinvent how we implement cybersecurity. We had in-house people. We may or may not still have in-house people, right? We've seen that before. And we need you to bring, your knowledge to bear. That's, I think, becoming more of the norm these days. I think more and more organizations are understanding that. There are some legacy components within this industry, I think, that are still in that mindset where I need to hire the guy, the person, the individual to run my cybersecurity, and they're my W 2. They're my in-house person. And what I have seen in my experience is those are often the cases where people fail.
It is, but it doesn't have to be. And I'll put on my PMP hat for just a second. In the Project Management Institute's principles of good management, the idea of the manager being a skilled uh, operator of resources rather than a skilled implementer of whatever the mission happens to be is is a tried and true method. It does work if two things happen. One, the manager understands that his role is to leverage and utilize the resources at his disposal, as opposed to trying to be some top down uh, uh, knower of all things and seer of all knowledge. That sort of thing doesn't work. When that's the mentality, it fails. But
Yeah.
if they have a proper project management ethic, that the role is to bring together resources and get the best outcomes, then it can work. It can work fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of goes back to, how we hire, how we mentor some of the younger um, professionals that we work with. There is a communication goes a very, very, very long way. And, speaking to somebody, just recently about, they're very, very new into the cybersecurity industry with a systems engineering background. And, the biggest piece of advice I gave them was understand what your customer needs, whether that's your manager, whether it's your boss, whether it's a client, whether you're providing analysis, you need to understand what they need and be able to communicate that to them in terms that they can understand. It has to be palatable. I know that you and I have both seen almost the inverse of that, where you have a highly skilled, highly technical individual, somebody who knows their specialized field in and out, but they are impossible to talk to. They are siloed to such a degree where they have blinders on, and that causes an even larger gap in security for the organization. And one of the things that's been very difficult to do is go into an organization to say you you need to break this up a little bit, right? You have to be able to have a multidisciplined team or a multidisciplined group of people to handle this. Having the single individual be that Swiss Army knife today effective is effective, right? To be uh, a a jack of all trades, so to speak, is effective in today's climate. Going forward, though, I don't see that necessarily continuing to be as effective as it has been in the past, mainly because of what you've mentioned, right? I mean, there's a need for a team to be multifaceted, not an individual.
Right. Yeah.
So there, I
And
think, did we solve it? Oh my goodness, did we solve the problem?
it is,
Did we just do it?
some of it was belly aching and complaining over the nature of our industry, but yeah, there are solutions that can actually mitigate this issue. I mean, it's not an unsolvable problem, but it does require some things that are not too common. One, a realistic and modest view of what can and can't be done in house, what needs to be done outside, but what ultimately needs to be achieved uh, in terms of comprehensive security. And in the end, you do need more than you're going to be able to budget in most organizations. So you got to figure out how to leverage a larger infrastructure to get what you want. But for those trying to enter the field, you know, right now the getting's good. If you want to get an entry level job, right now they're hiring. Just be aware of the fact that the day is probably coming if you don't build your skill set up and very broadly, where you will basically become obsolete, and only those with more broad and deep skills will survive. But for the next 5 years, I think you're fine. Just get the entry level job, and who
Sure.
knows? You know,
The competition is going to be stiff, and it's not all about the certifications. It's not all about what degree you have, and it's certainly not all about your personality or your ability to communicate. I think it's all of those things.
yeah,
You're going to have to be you're going to have your expertise at a certain level though to
yeah.
get to that now more common level, but it's going to become a higher level.
A number of industries have made the same thing that you're describing, where they had a huge demand. They're taking everybody for a finite period of time, but eventually the bottom falls out of that, and
Yep.
only the best, the cream of the crop, survives when it collapses. It happened with the paper MCSEs back in the late '90s.
Right.
Everybody and their
Right.
mother got the cert and got jobs,
Yep.
but within 10 years, a lot of those folks were making half of what they were making before, if they were even still in the business.
Hmm.
I could see the
Yeah.
same thing happening here.
I can see the same thing happening here. I do think that there is a potential bottom that's going to fall out where you have the people who only have paper experience, right? Book experience are going to fall to the wayside. They're going to get paid a heck of a lot less, if anything. And that is why you're going to, if I were giving any kind of advice to any young cyber professionals out there right now, I would tell them you need to find a specific sector within cybersecurity, become an expert, whether it be cloud computing, whether it be machine learning, AI, something to that effect. Become an expert in it because you're going to be needed to be an expert. It's going to be a requirement that you be an expert in that
Exactly.
specific field. Otherwise, you're probably going to find yourself, being a paper pusher and just working solely in Excel, and for a lot less money than you're making right now. But it's definitely happening. I really do believe that's on the horizon. Um, Again, hey, there's certain clients that we've had who I think in 20 years they're going to be the same way they are today. But I think the industry as a whole is definitely moving in that direction.
I really do. Definitely. All right.
So I guess we agreed, didn't we? Ultimately.
You know, from
Ultimately we
different
agreed.
angles, from
Yeah.
different sides.
I
I
would
think it's going to
definitely
come together
I
a
would
little bit.
definitely say that it is it this is just as this isn't necessarily cybersecurity related. This is any industry. Anytime you have to be an expert or a consultant in any situation, if you can't communicate the idea to someone who's not an expert, you're not going to make it
Yeah,
very far.
get out of there.
Get out.
Get out.
So if you know becoming that expert is a massive part of it. Becoming an expert in a growing field is a part of it, but having the ability to explain it to somebody who's not an expert, that's that's how experts make their bread and butter. That's how people become experts and, not pariahs,
And
honestly.
valuable experts, you know.
Right, right. Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Be safe, be secure, be sure. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.